About the stress, all of us feel it. And that should give you pleasure, I hope. You know, knowing this, that practically everyone who is in academia and has to write academically faces this stress. How do we respond to it? Many of us devise a kind of discipline where this unpleasant activity of writing can be just handled in the least stressful manner. So you say, for instance, write 100 words every day, so that by the end of 10 days, you'll have an assignment of 1,000 words, and you would have achieved something, yeah, with the minimum stress. The other way is procrastinating, which I do most frequently. I'm a habitual procrastinator. So I end up doing something else which is less important, and I feel very good about myself. So that's where I convert my pleasure, my stress on academic writing of not having done my research, not having written my academic paper, which was due on such and such deadline, by doing something which was less important. So I evaluate student papers, I write book reviews, smaller, simpler things, less stressful things, where I have effectively procrastinated by not doing the main thing and got pleasure out of it. Yeah. Some people call it multitasking also, but it works. And most of us procrastinate terribly. Ask around and you'll realize how widespread procrastination is. And in fact, if you want to laugh at it, there is a very interesting book by a very well-known philosopher. His name is John Perry. He teaches philosophy at Stanford, and he has written a book called The Art of Procrastination, where he says that how he has made procrastination into a philosophical principle and art, and uh, turned his stress into pleasure. So I hope that answers your dilemma about pleasure and stress. As teachers, this is something and as researchers, this is something we encounter on a daily basis. How do you minimize bias, especially for things where it might affect you emotionally, especially, or for things that you have very firm political opinions on? Uh, I think one of the ways of doing this is to suggest to your student uh, the various possibilities of what they're writing. For instance, I'm not talking about biases in evaluation. I'm talking about biases in teaching. I'm saying that I should be able to reduce biases. I should be able to introduce my students to a variety of perspectives and ways of thinking about a particular issue. Yeah, so that it's not only what I favor that gets a prominence in the teacher-student interaction. It's a subjective activity, and it's unlikely to be unbiased ever, but what we can try and do is to minimize it. How do we use multiple sources, and how do we apply them, use them in academic writing? This is a whole workshop we do anyway as part of our writing courses. But I hope that some of the examples I shared of creative programs helps you understand this a little bit. So I think the idea is, so if your multiple sources, and one is a textual source, the other is a video clip, the third might be a piece of music, for instance, or the fourth could be an image or a photograph. Uh, it is possible for you to identify the main questions you want to work on and ask those same questions of all these sources. In this, you can identify how the the particularities of that medium differs in conveying the narrative. That's one way of understanding multiple sources. So I can see how uh, a piece of a newspaper article describes Sikh museums different from, say, a photograph. So it's the medium which is different, for instance. then I could talk about it in my academic writing. Uh, so it's basically identifying your questions, I would say, and asking those same questions to your different sources, and then also seeing whether that source is actually helpful in answering those questions at all. That is also a good way of thinking about multiple sources. Do you actually need to think about all of these sources? Also, could be another way of looking at it. Uh, how do we transfer knowledge into academic writing? Um, Again, I hope some of the examples of the creative programs helped you understand that. So here we are talking about a pun, or we are talking about a recipe. And through that workshop, one was able to see that how was that recipe writing, the act of cooking and recipe writing, could be informed by feminist theory, could be informed by subaltern theory, could have aspects of class, region, gender, which uh, I, as a cook, when I'm cooking in my house, might not have thought about. So, workshops like these or approaches like these help you transfer this knowledge, which could be part of your everyday life, into an academic setting. It's something that has bothered us all at the Writing Center and fellow academics also. So you're quite right in pointing out that how research may sap, the requirements of research may sap voice in academic writing, especially research-based academic writing. Uh, how do I deal with it as a researcher? And then perhaps I could reflect on how do we deal with it when we are interacting with students, when we are asking them to write in academic writing. As a researcher, I think some of the disciplines at least, are changing and being more accommodative of first person accounts. And this has come with a broadening of our understanding of what constitutes a source, a more postmodern understanding of the value of experience as a source and as a valid academic practice. So I increasingly write my own research papers using the first person. Sometimes I do get confused and switch to third person, but I'm able to see that there are inconsistencies. So I end up doing this. When I'm talking to students about voice, there's also a great anxiety about originality. So, what does voice mean? Does it mean that I have to come up with something that no one has ever thought of before? Does it mean that I engage with existing work, existing knowledge, and just paraphrase it in my language? Where does voice come in? Uh, and this is something which is, I don't have fixed ideas or fixed guidelines on how to deal with this in student interaction, but we try and I try and suggest to the students that your voice builds on what is existing knowledge. At the same time, if you can show some interesting aspects or ask new questions or think of new questions, uh, that should be an enough contribution at an undergrad level in terms of your voice getting into the academic discourse about a particular topic. This is a problem I also face, not in terms of Hindi versus English, but in my own research while learning Punjabi. So I work on Sikh museums, and for my PhD, I had to learn to read sources in Gurumukhi, to interact in Punjabi, and so on. I learned Punjabi on my own with the help of a primer, which meant that I could read and write well, but I can't think in Punjabi. I can't speak Punjabi or couldn't speak Punjabi very well. So I would also first frame my thoughts in Hindi or English, put them down, and then try and see if I could use them in Punjabi. The only way I have improved my speaking and writing in Punjabi is to write again and again. If you're interested in particular exercises, I'd be happy to share with you some over email or so. But let me assure you that this is a common problem and this can be reduced with practice. I'm still trying to improve my written Punjabi and spoken Punjabi. Science students tend to write less and seem to have less flair when it comes to writing as compared to us others in humanities or social sciences. Um, some of the science institutes in higher education have instituted writing centers. So I know that IIT Gandhinagar has a writing studio, which is working on creating or introducing science writing across scientific disciplines. So they're not at one level, they are teaching basic sentence construction as well as how to make paragraphs, how to structure your arguments, structure your assignments and so on at that level. But at the same time, they're also working to encourage teachers in different disciplines to introduce writing elements in their teaching. So they are asking a teacher of mathematics at, for instance, at IIT Gandhinagar to have one writing component in their teaching practice, which might, in the long term, if it becomes institutionalized, might help science students work on this.